Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
Welcome to Marriage Bible Study Part 2.
Here we're going to talk about yet some more scriptures about what God says in His Word about marriage.
This is an amazing and exciting journey, and we look forward to the changes that God does in your life. Hey, it's good to be back with you again. We've had one time that we've met with you in the video, and we just want to make sure that if you're watching this, that you did watch the first video.
We're excited to get to walk through some other scriptures with you today.
Yeah. First, let's talk a little bit about the homework that you've done, and we want to make sure that we want to encourage you that we know that this is a challenging time in your marriage, and we want to encourage you to be patient because you didn't get where you are currently overnight, and the changes are going to take some time.
Right. So we know this is hard, and we just ask, please hang in there. Just continue to go forward. Try to push away the negative thoughts you're probably feeling, because we've interacted with enough couples to know you're probably having some negative thoughts.
And are probably ready to bring up some issues, and that's
Yeah.
what we're asking you to remember, to hold off on bringing up issues for now. We'll get to
Yeah.
that soon.
So the thing is, if you bring up issues and you haven't repaired your foundation first, you're probably going to do it poorly. And we ask, has what you've been doing been working? Probably
right.
not, or you wouldn't be here, right? So we're going to ask you to lay that down so you can pick up something different.
We're looking at giving you tools that you can be able to communicate more effectively with your partner. There's a lot of process here, and this is a progressive work that if you're doing your
Yes.
homework, you should be seeing some changes in the way you think. Don't be looking at your partner for how they're
Right.
changing, but just be judging yourself. How am I thinking differently? And so one thing we want to address is the first thing is taking your relationship with the Lord to the next level. And so this is one thing that we presented to you as the very starting point, and that is doing something, and we encourage Bible reading, because that is going to make a profound impact on the way that you see and that you're interacting with your spouse.
Right, because if we're sensitive to the Lord, we're increasing in sensitivity toward each other. There's some things Holy Spirit just doesn't let us get by with. And when we
Right.
train ourselves to hear His voice, and we hear His grieving over the way we would interact with our spouse, that shapes us. Because guess what? When we get upset with each other, sometimes we don't care as much what they think about what's going on. But
So-
if we're maintaining that relationship, we do care what Holy Spirit thinks.
So if you haven't done this and haven't begun, we want to encourage you strongly to begin doing something
Yes.
in the area of Bible reading, to put some time in, allow yourself to be influenced by God's thoughts, and let that retrain your thinking. And a lot of times the responses that we start hearing from couples is, I feel more peace.
I feel more calm.
Yeah. So
I can hear my spouse better.
yeah. So there's internal changes that you could not make on your own. This is a work that God does by His Spirit inside of you, just by receiving His words. It's miraculous. It's not just
Yes.
a natural book. It is a
Right.
powerful book, and this is taking His words into you is going to transform you.
It's the single most effective thing that we do with couples.
Right. So let's talk about abstaining from negativity and making positive requests. That's another area of the homework that we gave to you. So basically, if you have something that you need to ask of your spouse, we want you to frame that as a positive request.
Yes, so make sure that if during this time of unconditional acceptance you have something you need to address, you may do it using the positive request one time respectfully, then back off and let your spouse decide between your spouse and the Lord, how they'll respond. We're not going to judge the spouse for what they do or don't do.
For example, would you please take out the trash? Instead of, you never take out the trash and it's really looking bad. So you
Right.
see the difference. One has a jab and an accusation tied to it, and
Right.
the other is just a simple request.
So we want to make sure we're working on the unconditional acceptance. That means, excuse me, I'm overlooking the things I want to see changed in my spouse going forward. This is foundational, because if we can't do that, we can't make a request well, and we can't present an issue well. These are part of the problems that you're likely having. This is what we're seeing in couples. So we just ask that you kind of have some trust here and be able to go forward with this aspect. It's not going to be comfortable, because you're going to feel like we're not addressing issues. I'm not going to pretend like nothing is going on. I'm not going to pretend like everything's okay. Why would I treat my spouse in a positive way when I'm so displeased? We're not asking anybody to pretend. We're asking you to make some positive steps, to make some changes, so you can work on your issues.
To focus on the good. A lot of times we lose sight of the good things that are present in our spouse because we become
Yeah.
so focused on the things that they need to change. So
Yeah.
we're not saying there's nothing that needs to change. We're just saying let's look at some positive things and be thankful for the positive things that we do have.
Because if we keep presenting things poorly, why keep on? If we know from the beginning our spouse will not hear what I'm about to say, why would we do it that way again? But you know, when we use these methods, what we hear spouses say is, wow, my spouse really listened to me and I felt heard. It made me want to give them the same respect back. So I really put out a lot more effort to hear what they had to say too. And we hear couples say, the form is working, the method is working. We can tell that when we use it, we're hearing each other.
Yeah. And sometimes couples feel that, man, this is really simple, but it
Yeah.
works. And that they're sometimes hearing each other for the first time in many
Yes.
years. They're finally able to hear each other.
Which softens the heart, encourages the couple to proceed in using the method, to be able to hear each other and be heard. Because that's what we really want, right? We want to be known on a deeper level. We want to be heard. We want our spouse to make some changes that are positive for us.
So many times if we're always giving an air of rejection to our spouse, it's
Yeah.
going to make them feel like they can never really do enough, they can never measure up, and sometimes it can cause them to want to give up.
It'll cause them to close, and it'll cause their heart to harden, and they'll withdraw. And some spouses, unfortunately, withdraw to the point they're not willing to work on the relationship anymore. So we're asking you, please open your heart. Let the Lord soften your heart to be able to work on your marriage.
Yeah. And so again, we want to encourage you to hang in there, keep doing your homework.
Don't give up.
And then we can progress on to more homework that we're going to
Yes.
give you in session 2. All right. Well, let's begin this time by looking at 1 Peter chapter 3, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 7. So he says, likewise, you wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. So when we look at that, he's really addressing that many times a wife may feel like her husband isn't doing the right thing. And so what's he saying there? That this person, this husband that you feel is being disobedient maybe to God, or maybe not doing all the things that he should do, that he can be won by your behavior.
Have we thought about winning our husband? That word means to gain. What if he's disobedient to everything related to God? What if he's disobedient in just one area? If you really think that he needs to line up with what God says that a husband ought to do, then this scripture is exactly for you to do.
That's right.
Notice, go ahead.
Well, one thing he says there, that the husband will be won by the conversation of the wives. So we know that men are visually stimulated and women are verbally stimulated.
Yes, so that's why women usually try to win the husband verbally. But guess what? He isn't won verbally.
He says right there that he can be won without a word.
And a lot of women would think, no, he needs to hear what I've got to say. No, he needs to see what you've got to say. We know that God made men to be visually stimulated by the body of a woman. So God is showing us how to use that as a woman to witness to him and win him. And it says, be in subjection and win by the conversation. This is how a woman wins. Subjection is almost a dirty word for some people because people have abused it. We're not talking about being coerced into sinning. We're not talking about an abusive relationship at all. So we're not addressing abuse. We are assuming we are interacting with couples that are not involved in abusing each other. That would be a totally different direction. So when we talk about submission, we have to say, women, are we willing to let the husband be the head of the family? Who's the head of the family? Are we willing to do it God's way? What about watching my behavior that it would be respectful to a man? What kind of an impact does God say that has on a man?
What if a woman feels like her husband is making a wrong decision? Should she not submit to that? So let's look at an example of that in the passage here where he says, in verse 5, he says, "For after this manner in the old time the holy women also who trusted in God adorned themselves, being in subjection to their own husbands, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, as long as you do well, and are not afraid with any amazement." So immediately I think of a couple of times that Abraham and Sarah went into another nation, and Abraham said, when we go in there, I want you to say that you are my sister. And so how many women do you think would like to be introduced as being a sister to their husband? They probably wouldn't.
No.
And so she probably didn't like that, but it says that she obeyed him. She went along with that. And guess what? Both times that Abraham was really concerned for his own life and their own welfare, and that's why he asked her to do that. And in both times, God worked it out for their good.
Yeah, and if we see, for after this manner, how did they trust God? After this manner, they were behaving in a respectful way toward their husband. They were more concerned with how they were clothed on the inside than on the outside. Yes, we should fix ourselves up for our husband, but our focus should be more on the way we look to him as having that meek and quiet spirit, and we're adorning that spirit man who we are on the inside, because that influences how I'm going to interact with my husband. If I have a meek and gentle spirit, that's going to show, isn't it, when I'm trying to address an issue?
Right. In other words, it's not all hinging on external beauty. It's the beauty on the inside.
Yeah. A man can be attracted to a woman for her external beauty and leave her for her internal ugliness.
That's right.
And we don't want that. And certainly leaving is not God's will for the marriage. But, we have to be willing to trust that God can direct the husbands. So we're not looking at the man, we're looking at our God to take care of us.
Right. And so in this passage here, we see that Sarah gave an example of a woman who believed that God was going to work things out for her good, even if she felt like the decision her husband was making wasn't the right one.
And we've had that happen in our own relationship.
Right. So really there's been probably a couple of times that really have stood out to Rhonda and myself, that I made a decision to do something that she wasn't on board with, but she didn't hound me over it. She allowed me to make that decision, even though she didn't agree with it. And guess what? Things didn't turn out right. And that only solidified to me the need that we needed to be in agreement, that I needed to wait until, that she was in agreement before moving ahead. And so this has made an impact on me for decades throughout our marriage.
Yeah, and a lot of women will try to force themselves into that spot. But if we let God do it by submitting, let Him make that decision anyway and be okay with it. And don't
'Cause
say I told you
they
so.
could be so concerned that no way, we're not going down that
Yeah.
path because I think this is really going to be bad for us. But what if God pulls your husband into depending on you more? He can make
Yeah.
even a bad thing that you see,
Yeah.
he can turn it around for good.
And that's what happened with us, because now Sean doesn't like to make major decisions, even minor ones, without checking with me. And
She
if
says I don't have a good feeling about it.
yeah,
My ears perk up. It's like, okay, we need to be in agreement.
yeah, what is it exactly that you're feeling? And so, if we can't find agreement, Sean is very willing now to find, okay, how can we blend he plus she in this situation instead of pushing more like he did in the early years to do it his way. The thing is, if we're patient and we're doing what we do because we trust God, God is going to work it out for us and cause things to go good for us. We don't have to be afraid.
That's showing that if you as a wife are trusting God, God can make even the negative things that you see work good in your marriage.
And in successful marriages, they've actually done research to compare marriages that succeed and marriages that fail. A marriage that succeeds does not divorce, where one that fails does. So they keep up with these couples from when they're newlyweds over the decades. And they found some things present in successful marriages that are absent in failing ones.
And so, one of those things I think is we see that a woman, when she doesn't feel heard, she can panic and she can start using more words want to be heard and actually shut down her husband.
So a man also is to receive influence from his wife. And did we talk about that yet?
We did in Genesis, yeah, last time.
Yeah. So we want to make sure we mention it again here, that receiving influence from the wife doesn't mean led around by the wife, by the nose, but it means that he can hear her. And it's okay to say, I'll prayerfully consider that.
That's right. Sometimes when we're discussing an issue, Rhonda can bring up something that she wants me to hear her about. And, this is something that a husband needs to let his wife know that he will seriously consider that, or we use the phrase prayerfully consider that.
And that gives a woman peace to know that what she presented is going to be seriously considered.
Right, because if she doesn't feel that you're considering her input, that's what she's called to do. That's the wiring that God put in her, is to present and to influence your decision making. And so if you're not receiving that influence, guess what? That's going to make her want to repeat herself, and this is what we call nagging, right? She's going to keep presenting that until she feels like you have heard it. And a woman many times will not feel comfortable making the decision. It's not, sometimes when we would deal with something, I would think Rhonda was continually presenting it because she was wanting to make the decision. I might finally say, okay, we'll do it your way. And she's like, I don't want you to just do it my way. I just want you to consider what I'm presenting.
Right. What you don't want, and as Sean mentioned, women nagging, that's a worldly response, not a godly response. But a woman will go into panic mode if she's not guarded and protecting herself from that. And she will pursue the man, and the man will emotionally kind of distance himself as she pursues when she doesn't feel heard. And so this can alleviate some of that type of stress in the relationship.
That's right. A lot of these things, if we just understand how God wired us, how God wired our spouse, we can work together with that instead of working against it.
Right.
So let's look at another verse here in verse 7. He's giving specific instruction to husbands. And one thing before I read this, I just want to point out that I think when God gives specific instruction to husbands, it's because there's a need there that husbands particularly need to pay attention to, but just because of the way we're wired. And the same way with wives. So here he says, likewise, you husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. So So one of the things that I notice here is that that he specifically says that you notice that you are heirs together. And a lot of times men have, just because we think in a more compartmentalized way, we have a tendency to think more singularly than plurally. And so he's saying think as a we. So women typically think more relationally. They think more inclusive. They're thinking about we. Men typically, by the way we're wired, are thinking me, more isolated.
Yeah. And notice it says to treat her as who act with her as unto the weaker vessel. That doesn't necessarily have to do with physical strength. Weaker and vessel have to do with the fact that she is gifted to him by God under his supervision and authority. And so the vessel part actually is referring to the fact that she's an instrument used by God to work on him. Does that not give a different perspective of why a man would honor his wife? When he
Wow.
does it, he's literally honoring God, because guess what? God gifted her to you.
And receive the help.
Yeah.
God put her there to help. You know, another thing in this verse here is he's showing to give honor to her. And so this is a valuation. You're prizing her. And so we want to make sure that we are esteeming highly our wives, and we want to think, man, what a honor, what a prize, what a treasure that you are to me. And these are all things that you may not feel comfortable with. Maybe you haven't been practicing these things. These are things that are going to make the relationship work
Yes.
better. All right, let's look at another passage here. Right now we're going to look at Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 21 through the end of the chapter. And so we're going to pick up in verse 23 where he gives instruction to the husbands. He said, "For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything." So one thing that we notice here is that there's particular need that women have and that men have. Men have more of a need for respect. And so when he says that wives are to submit to their husbands, he's addressing that need that men have, and the need that the women have is for being loved or cherished. And so he says, husbands, love your wives as Christ also loved the church.
This has an impact on both. So, and remember, we really care what God has to say about how we should be as a husband and a wife. So if God points these things out, maybe it's not what comes naturally, and we need to especially focus on that.
Right. And this reminds us the way that Christ loves the church is unconditionally, right? So he's not just loving us for everything that we do for him and because our performance is always up to par. So obviously many times we do miss it, but his love remains consistent. And this is the kind of love that a husband can show to his wife, is that consistent and faithful love.
And the husband-wife relationship is the Christ church pattern. So it's what we see in this physical world that models something spiritual. And we have a duty to show that well.
You know, when he addresses that wives submit themselves to their husbands, this is a choice that a wife has to make. And, early on in our marriage, my mentality toward that was that I could love her in such a way that it would make it easy for her to submit to me. And so
And it has.
Yeah. So if my behavior is such that it is repelling to her, makes it more difficult for her, I think that a woman will naturally submit to a man who's doing and loving her the way that he's supposed to.
It does make it easier. And really, we have to think, it's my duty between me and the Lord to do the right thing, and that I not pose a stumbling block for my spouse. When we do the right thing, and we see this so much with couples, it makes it easier for the other person to also do the right thing.
I don't think that really submission is something that I can really enforce or demand.
True.
Is something that must be willingly given by choice.
That's what submission is.
I mean, you look at the way we respond to God. I mean, obviously he wants us to submit to him, but he does not override our will nor try to force us to.
Right.
It's willingly.
And he lets us grow into those things that we need to do as we're ready. He doesn't force us or drive us into those things.
Right. So let's drop down and look at a little bit more here. And so he says that that Christ might sanctify and cleanse the church with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So notice how he's accomplishing this washing. He's accomplishing it with his words. And he says this is how Christ presents the church to himself as glorious or without blemish or without spot or wrinkle. So really, husbands, you have the capability with your words to either present your wife as a glorious bride or the opposite. Okay, so you could be, in other words, this is another thing I think that early on in our marriage, I saw that I could make of Rhonda the type of wife that I spoke over her. And so if I was speaking negative things over her, that would be what I would get. And so it behooves us, right, to speak over our spouse. And women have a real need in the area of having that verbal affirmation from their husbands.
And I remember in the early years, there were times when it was more challenging maybe to submit because maybe I didn't agree with the decision, but I didn't say anything or put Sean down about it. I respected him where he was, believing for the Lord to grow him because that's God's job. And it can be sometimes challenging for a woman to submit to a man when she doesn't agree. But is it really submission if I only submit if I agree, but I'm not about to submit if I don't agree? I mean, you kind of look at it like a teenager or any of your children. If they only submit when they agree with you, are they really submitting? Are they really doing their own thing?
Right. And, obviously that takes a lot of trust for a woman to be able to believe that this is going to work out good for me. I really don't see how this is good, but I'm trusting anyway. And so it's good, obviously for husbands to be exhibiting the kind of behavior that makes their wife want to trust them even when things don't look like they're going to turn out right.
Right. And it says in Proverbs 21:1, if the Lord directs the heart of a king like he does a river of water wherever he wants to. And if he can do that for a nation, can't he do that with a man for his wife and children?
Wow.
So a woman has to be able to offer her perspective and then back off and let the man lead the house. She may be afraid for him to fall on his face, so to speak, in making a decision, and she wants to protect him for the sake of herself and the family from mistakes. But those are learning opportunities.
That's right. I mean, we've learned so much by doing things the wrong way in our own marriage.
Yeah.
Maybe the wrong way of speaking, the wrong tone, so many things, so it's not that, doing all these things that you're never going to slip up and you're never going to make any mistakes.
Right. And so she may refuse to go down a path because at the beginning it's not pretty, it's not wide and open, but it's full of briars and thorns. But yet, what if that's the path God wants the family to go down because of what will be learned as a result?
Wow.
You can't see the end of the path from the beginning. So how can you really say, and who made the wife the one to call that and say, this is a good choice, this is a bad choice? Because we cannot predict what God's going to do with that choice.
Yeah, many times we do learn by our mistakes, and that can be a really good teacher to us.
Definitely. So we have to be careful as women that we can yield that final decision to the man. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't feel comfortable with that, as long as we say it respectfully. This is the way I see it, and I would like for you to prayerfully consider this. And for the man to take that responsibility, to take it before God, especially if his wife disagrees.
Yeah, we need to be able to need to be willing to be able to hear a different perspective. And sometimes we can become so isolated in our thinking that we're not really open to hearing a different perspective. And so let's keep looking at some more here. So it says, "So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loves his wife loves himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, even as the Lord the church." And this is a real need that women have, to feel cherished, and that men, husbands, you're the only one that can do that.
Isn't that interesting that God addresses this in the Word? Because in the Christ-church relationship, Christ is nourishing and cherishing the bride, the church. And it's it's a woman's key need, and probably what attracted her to the man in the dating relationship in the first place.
That's right. You know, I'm reminded so many times when we read this of a country song years ago that had the phrase in it, "She don't know she's beautiful." You know, and that's something that men, that we need to regularly. You can tell your wife one day that she's beautiful and that you love her, but you've got to tell her that again the next day.
It's nice to hear it.
That's right, because she's going to wonder, you know, do you not like the way I fixed my hair today? Or do you not like, you know, what I'm wearing because you didn't say anything? And men sometimes are thinking, well, I told you that already, you know, last week, and nothing's changed. I still feel the same way. But the wife needs to regularly be having those words wash over her. They're going to transform her thinking.
Because she is verbally and emotionally stimulated, so that's meeting her need.
That's right. That's that's an emotional need that women have, to be receiving those words that have a washing and cleansing effect. I mean, what does it do inside the female brain to be hearing those words of love and affirmation from her husband?
And so, to wrap up this scripture, we see that what it looks like to be the Christ Church pattern.
Yeah, and so we can learn so much, really, because he said that this is, I didn't read that, but it says that this is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. So as he's talking, as he's talking about husbands and wives, he's saying, hey, this is a mystery. This is also the way the Christ church relationship works. So we can see many similarities in the way God interacts with us and the way that husbands and wives interact with each other. So many times that when in your marriage relationship you're experiencing difficulty, you know, we can start looking at what is the root cause, what is really taking place.
This is really hard, and we know it. We've interacted with enough of you to know some of you are really struggling right now to hear some of these scriptures.
Yeah, many times we have become focused on what I need, what I want, and I'm not getting my needs met, and I'm upset.
Yeah, because that's what happens when we go with our needs not being met, and both spouses are dealing with that if you're struggling, and that can make us hurt enough that we're looking at that pain and we're wanting to start demanding that the spouse take care of me.
And many times we're making it worse when we start demanding things of our spouse. And so really we have to do a retake and realize what are the things that we really need to take place to make this relationship work right. And we have to get our eyes off of what the other person is or isn't doing for me.
So a lot of spouses have let their pain sort of dictate direction, and then it's really like a form of idol worship. They're so focused on self that then their needs become the commandments of their kingdom. They begin to demand this of their spouse. They now have rules and laws you must do and must not do, and begin to demand, and then punishments, right? The cold shoulder treatment, the silent treatment for disobeying me, the distance because you are displeasing me.
Putting them in solitary confinement.
So really what's happening? we're worshiping self. It's a
Right.
form of idol worship when our need becomes the focus and the issue is more the focus than the spouse and the
And then
relationship.
starting to withhold things from each other, withholding needs that should be being met until
Yeah.
you come around and you take care of my needs.
Because the thing is, it's not based on our spouse deserving anything.
Right.
This has to do with obedience to God.
Right.
So if I'm looking at, well, he doesn't deserve this, she doesn't deserve to be treated like that, is that why we would do it?
Wow.
Or is it because God said so and it has nothing to do with the other person?
Yep. Somebody's got to step up and begin doing the right thing. And then many times we can set a precedent. We can begin a cycle even.
Yes.
Where one initiates showing love, the other one responds. And I typically look at the man in the relationship as being the one who initiates, and the woman is built, I think, as a responder.
Right. And so, that's a good point, is that it breaks the cycle and starts new cycles. Because
Right.
what you're probably dealing with, because we see this so much, right, is there's vicious cycles going on. Somebody's got to pull out of that cycle.
Right. So let's look at a very important verse of Scripture in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 4. It says, "The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but are mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ."
Wow. I love this scripture. It's so powerful.
Where's the battle taking place but in our thinking, the way that we think about our
Yes.
spouse, the things that need to change?
Yes, so when it says the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, what are our weapons? Aren't they the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God? And so it tells us what's happening. It says what our weapons will do, what the Word of God will do. And we've studied a lot of scriptures together in these sessions. They're mighty to the pulling down of strongholds. And then it goes on in the next verse to say what the strongholds are. Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against God's knowledge.
Wow. So, and we've looked at God's knowledge, right? The verses that we've looked at, I'm reminded of another passage in Romans chapter 12 where he says, "Not to be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." When we take in God's way of thinking, the way that he sees us, the way he sees our spouse, the way that he says that husbands should respond to their wives, the way that he says wives should respond to their husbands. This is the knowledge of God that we're talking about, and bringing that knowledge, introducing those thoughts from God into our minds so that we begin to see and act toward each other in different ways will transform the marriage.
Yeah, because there are imaginations and high things the enemy will present as the accuser of the brethren. And guess what? In the family, in the marriage, accusing the spouse, fault finding, exalting that over God's knowledge, which is what I should be doing, instead of what he or she should be doing. So these things have lifted themselves up, and the contrary thoughts of what's so difficult for me to do when I do my part in the relationship, these are thoughts that we need to cast down and replace these thoughts with God's Word.
It doesn't mean the thoughts are just going to magically go away either. It's something that we're going to have to actively take our stand and resist those thoughts that are coming into our mind that we've maybe become accustomed to allowing. And he even says that they've set up themselves as strongholds.
Yes.
So you can allow some negative or wrong way of thinking to continue to the point that it's not just there, but it's become a fortress. It's become a stronghold.
And the enemy is actually using our own thought processes to take shots at us from inside our very own heart, attacking our spouse and attacking our marriage from the inside by what we're thinking on.
Right.
If we're thinking these negative thoughts, they're tearing down the relationship. They're belittling the spouse on the inside. And we need to take those thoughts captive.
That's exactly what he says that needs to be done to
Make them
change.
obedient.
That's right. To change this scenario is we're going to have to take hold of the thoughts. And this is where you get into the
Yeah.
homework that we're presenting is we're dealing with the way you're thinking.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the way you're thinking about your spouse. We're dealing with the way that you see yourself and the way you see them.
Yeah. We've got to be able to lay it down and let God be Holy Spirit and interact with the heart of our spouse.
Yeah.
And we've got to only deal with ourselves.
Right, because I can't change Rhonda and she can't change me. This is something that we have to decide to do on our own.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that can change me.
And when we pull off our spouse's back, so to speak, we really allow them to be able to even hear God.
That's right. You know, one of the mentalities that we have to change is that of being a taker instead of a giver. We have to take on the way of thinking that I am in this to give to my spouse.
Have a servant's heart.
Not what I'm going to get out of it. And obviously we need to have our needs met. But you
Right.
have to first have the thinking of a giver, that I'm going to give and take care of my spouse's need and let God. Then I believe that when you do what you're supposed to do, that God will take care of you.
Yeah. And I can hear people right now because we hear it so much, but what about my needs? What do I do about my needs? We know how it says when we lay down our life that we live, but when we hold on to it, we die. Grabbing hold, and it's not talking about physically dying, but when we grab hold of my way, we can kill the marriage. But when we lay it down and offer it as a sacrifice to the Lord and say, God, this is yours.
Yep.
If this is going to be met, it's going to be met because you took care of it.
So many times, you know, many of us can relate to when we first turned to God and the struggle that we faced in giving up my way of doing things and laying down the things that I want in life. And many times the fear there is, well, if I, serve God, then I'm not going to get to have any fun. And sometimes, this can translate over even into the marriage and think, well, if I'm giving of myself to my spouse, am I just going to be taken advantage of and I'm not going to get my needs met? Those are just fears that are standing in your way.
Yeah. And so the whole thing is being willing and obedient because we have faith in God.
That's right, and it's being willing, doing these things from a willing heart, not begrudging the fact that I've got to do it, but believing that God's going to cause this to work out for my good, for our marriage.
And am I willing to obey God just because He says so, or am I going to disobey Him because my spouse did?
Wow.
That doesn't hold up before God.
It's like trying to fight fire with fire. You're just going to make things worse.
And we know it's hard, okay? And we're asking you, hold in there. We're going somewhere.
Right.
And we're going to walk with you and walk out of this if you will hold on.
Step by step.
Yes.
You can do this. It can be done. We've seen many couples in
Yes.
varying degrees of intensity of distress to make tremendous gains in the way that they interact with each other. You can have a rewarding and satisfying marriage.
So when you were dating, there were things that you did that attracted your spouse to you and things your spouse did to attract you to them. These are things that start the relationship and things that keep the relationship.
That's right. And so we want you to keep doing the previous homework assignments that we've given you of unconditional love and acceptance and thinking on the 10 positive qualities about your spouse and
Working on the friendship level.
Right.
These things are going to layer on top of each other.
So you keep doing all that, and of course taking your relationship with the Lord to the next level. And now we're going to add to that what we call caring days. So caring days concept is basically where each spouse is going to make a list of 15 to 18 caring acts, gestures, words that can be done that they would appreciate, that they would value.
And it's little things, and we say 15 to 18 to give your spouse enough to pick from, But please don't put 20 or 30 or 50, as we've seen in the past. Yeah, that can be overwhelming and communicate you're just not hitting the mark and you're not even close. So 15 to 18.
Right. So when you make this list, then you're going to give that list to your spouse, and what we want you to do is we want you to pick off of your spouse's list about 5 things
Per
to
day.
do.
And let's say these are not big things.
Right.
These are little things like kiss me before you leave for work in the morning.
Send me a text that you were thinking about me or where you are.
Ask me how my day went. These are not things like let's go on a date.
Or a movie or
right.
something that's not really, buy me a bouquet of flowers.
This is anywhere from 10 seconds to 10 minutes. We're talking a brief little thing that means I saw you.
Ask
I
me how my
you.
day went.
Yes.
Hold my hand when we are sitting by each other.
Right.
These are little things. These are going to be things that are meaningful to you, that says I care about you. I'm thinking about
right.
you. You're important to me. These types of things.
And it'll be interesting to see what's on your spouse's list.
It
They're
is.
not going to be the same.
No, it's not. And that really reveals that, both of you have different needs and are going to interpret that you're valued in different ways. If I'm trying to show value to Rhonda based on what I receive value from, that's different.
It's not going to meet my need.
Right.
It would meet his.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that we're meeting the other person's need.
We don't want to pick anything off of there either that's going to be kind of a bone of contention from something in the past.
Right.
Something maybe that you have asked for that is kind of a contentious thing. So we're not trying to stir up some aggravation here. We're just trying to find something that ministers to your spouse.
These are neutral things.
Yeah, right.
That basically say, I'm noticing you, you're
right.
important to me.
And do this daily.
Yes.
This is every day.
So you want to update your list as needed, and then you want to exchange lists, and then you're going to pick those 5 things off your spouse's list. Do 5 every day. We don't want to hear, oh, I forgot. Yeah, it took me a while to get started on that. Well, if we want to move forward, we have to do our homework.
Right.
And so you want to make sure, if you have to set a notification on your phone, make sure you're doing your homework.
You don't necessarily have to go through all 15. It could be the same 5 over and over.
And that's okay.
Right. So basically what we're wanting to do is to get you to thinking in the mentality of this is what ministers to my spouse, and I'm doing something that is ministering, taking care of them.
Right. And so show appreciation for the things that you have on your list of 10 things, but as your spouse does these things, please notice them. Don't just act like it didn't happen. Your spouse is putting out effort, and what's really sad is to see a spouse put out effort. They're going to miss the mark sometimes, maybe a lot,
right.
But they're working in the right direction, and we need to appreciate that.
Yeah, and so if basically all of this is a prerequisite for getting into the next time that we meet with you in our session 3, and that's where we're going to begin giving you the tools for how to discuss issues.
Yeah.
If you haven't been doing your homework, you're not really going to have the right mindset for how to properly discuss issues.
And so that's why this is so important. We know you're eager to address issues, but also to address them well in a way that isn't hurtful, but that can actually make you say, wow, that was nice, because that's what we hear from couples. As a matter of fact, just this week we heard from one. It's like, that really felt good to feel heard and to actually hear the other one. And they'll say things like, well, that's not that big of a request, because we teach you how to break it down.
And that going through those steps is really very simple. It's very easy. So we're not presenting something that's a complicated math equation, or you're going to be walking the chalk line. This is something you can do. They're just some very simple steps to be able to speak and be heard.
And a lot of people, they've never been taught how to work through issues.
Right.
The thing is, these things we've been presenting in this session and the last session are foundational.
Right.
And it's critical that these things be done to prepare you to move into the next level of being able to discuss issues. So please be prepared as we interact with you going forward to say, yes, I did my homework and I did it
Because
well.
the flip side is, if you basically we get to the next session and you say, no, we haven't been staying out from addressing issues and
Working
haven't been,
unconditional
haven't been
acceptance.
accepting my spouse unconditionally.
Working
We've actually
on
been,
friendship.
we've actually been bickering and fighting regularly. You know, we're probably very likely to say, well, we need to work
take
some
a little
more.
longer.
Yeah, let's work on this some more, because there's no point in going into dealing with addressing
It won't
issues
work.
if you're still not accepting your spouse unconditionally.
Because the absence of these things is part of the problem in your picture.
Right.
Yes, we know there could be other things like affairs, addictions, a variety, a lack of trust, lying. We know that those things are going on in some of your marriage. Trust us. Let's go there. But let's go there the right way so that you're able to actually make progress, because that's what's really going to make the difference to you in the long run, and for you to feel this is effective.
Right. And many times, you know, as we've covered with you many different scriptures regarding marriage, you know, God tells us something, and we basically need to accept that by faith and believe that if we do things His way, things are going to work out for our good. When many times, you know, the world or the devil may be screaming to us, no, if you do it God's way, you know, you're going to fall flat on your face, or you're not going to be taken care of. And then we have to fight against that kind of mentality.
So take the scriptures that we've discussed in the first session and in this session. Make sure you're studying those.
Right.
Not from the perspective of what should my spouse do, but from the perspective of, Lord, what are you trying to work into or out of me? If my spouse is trying me, what fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control, Galatians 5:22 and 23. What is the Holy Spirit trying to work in me that I might produce good fruit? So you want to be studying them. Look at them individually if you've got a lot of issues going on. Don't necessarily discuss them together unless you both feel comfortable with that.
Right. And remember, you're the only one that can change you. You can't change your spouse. Okay, that concludes lesson 1 and 2 for you on repairing the foundation of your marriage.
So we hope you continue to study these scriptures, adding these to the other ones from video 1. Allow 2 weeks between the videos, remember, so you have plenty of time to change old habits and develop new ones.
This is an exciting process, and we look forward to getting into lesson 3 with you on resolving issues.